Hello, it's Richard Haggerty here, and I want to talk to you today about something that's really, I think, important in terms of stopping smoking, why the drugs don't work. Okay? And here's the thing, look, doesn't it make sense? Most smokers want to quit. Okay, we know that. They want to quit, they're looking for a shortcut to get it done as quickly as possible. Drugs promise that shortcut. We're conditioned to believe that from when we're very young. You know, you have a headache, you have a headache tablet. You know, need something else, you have this tablet. So it makes sense logically. And the problem is, if you go outside of yourself to try and solve the problem, you will never solve the very problem because smoking isn't in a game. Think about it. You're reaching for cigarettes so that you can fulfill an inner need. You don't want to replace that with drugs. It makes complete sense that somebody would want to find a shortcut. I remember recently chatting with someone who was talking about taking Chantix, and it doesn't really matter on the type of drugs, but let's mention this one for a moment. So Chantix is a drug that's prescribed for quitting smoking. The way it works, it binds to the receptors in your brain where nicotine normally binds. When Chantix is in the system, nicotine can't bind to the brain receptors. So it causes a drop in your dopamine, the dopamine that actually creates the nicotine cravings. Okay, so this drop in dopamine that creates the nicotine cravings is really understood as the mechanism that's supposed to make Chantix work, but it doesn't. First of all, you've got to understand that if you're trying to replace a one drug with another, you're always going to be stuck in a dopamine-inducing cycle. What do we mean by that? Well, look, your body's going to be, and we'll look at some research on this. Your body is looking outside to be able to, and in anticipation of receiving dopamine. So it doesn't really matter whether it's cigarettes or Chantix or a cream bun. If it anticipates that it's going to be getting that hit of dopamine because it's expecting the reward and it expects that reward to be pleasurable, then you're going to be having an elevated level of dopamine. Dopamine is the feel-good hormone, all right? But the problem is you're teaching your body that you need to go outside to get that hit. And so being a non-smoker is always an inside job. What we don't want to do is replace one addiction with another. Okay, listen, what you're trying to do is to be free of the old dependence that you used to have on smoking cigarettes, on smoking e-cigarettes, so you can quit smoking and become a non-smoker. If you're going to do that, and you're going to do that successfully, you absolutely have to change your relationship to the inner feelings, the inner expectations that are going on. And there's some really solid research around this and on how dopamine affects your expectations, all right? And this is becoming increasingly clear now that we have to understand these neurotransmitters and the role they play in your body, particularly if you're going to be a non-smoker. Let's talk about dopamine in relation to smoking. So dopamine, it's a neurotransmitter. It helps people remember, it'll help smokers remember, it'll help non-smokers remember that behavior leads to a reward. Or, and this is crucial, what the brain expects is going to be a reward. What the brain anticipates is going to be a reward. Okay, so the signal of, you know, the picture, the thought, the image, the sight of a cigarette can become the anticipated reward, okay, and that locks in this dopamine expectation cycle, all right? So dopamine's a type of neurotransmitter, your body makes it, your nervous system uses it to send messages between nerve cells. And it's the feel-good hormone, which is what's crucial for you to become a non-smoker. You see, dopamine is the feel-good hormone. It's this neurotransmitter that your body makes. Your nervous system uses it to send messages between cells. So one of the key functions of it is it's your brain's reward and pleasure system. Okay, that's why it's called the feel-good hormone. So, it generates feelings of pleasure, satisfaction, motivation, and it's all in anticipation, ultimately, of future rewards. And if you think about this in relation to quitting smoking and becoming a non-smoker, you'll see why we're going to be working with this system. We've actually got to create, shall we say, a positive anticipation about your life as a non-smoker without having to reach for things externally. Smokers are constantly telling me, oh, I want to take this drug. I've got to take people are recommending for other fellow strugglers, people who are struggling to quit smoking, tell other people who want to quit smoking, oh, just keep, take this drug, suck on a straw, get really busy. Okay. And if you're doing that, that's useful to a certain point, the distraction, but it's not taking into account the dopamine. Remember, you already have this conditioned expectation inside of you're going to feel good from smoking. You're not, but that's what that's what's happening inside you. Now, you get what we call FOMO, fear of missing out, okay? Because what are you fundamentally worried about if you don't have cigarettes? Well, it's this dopamine, it's a fear of not having this dopamine hit. Now, some really interesting research was done, and there's even a paper, dopamine enhances expectation of pleasure in humans. Okay. And what the author said is human action is strongly influenced by expectations of pleasure. All right. So making decisions ranging from which products to buy, which job offer to accept, requires an estimation, good or bad, about the likely outcomes and how those outcomes will make you feel. Okay. So they were looking at the biological basis of subjective estimations of what they call subjective estimations of future hedonic reactions. In other words, how does your brain anticipate you're going to feel? How good does your brain think you're going to feel on balance? All right. And that's where the dopamine comes in. That's why it's so crucial for you on your journey to becoming a non-smoker. What the research has found in dopamine enhances expectation of pleasure in humans is that what they call the imaginative construction of positive future life events subsequently enhances estimates of hedonic pleasure to be derived from those same events. In other words, if you expect that it's going to be fun, easy to make a change, you're going to experience that. If you expect that it's going to be hard, you're going to experience that. And the challenge is that the holding pattern that's in place in smokers is that smoking is going to make me feel better. Okay, and so if they try to change away from that, they've got a holding pattern there where there's the body mind already has an expectation that it's going to reward with dopamine for continuing smoking. So they're stuck. This is why it's crucial to get help. Okay, because the research findings are providing the first direct evidence of the role of dopamine in the modulation of what they call subjective hedonic expectations. In other words, how good you think you're going to feel. And that is the same whether you're thinking about continuing smoking or whether you're thinking about quitting. And here's the thing, if you try and do this by yourself, you're going to be fighting the very neurotransmitters, the very basis of human biology, physiology, which is why it's important to get help, because this isn't in a game. It's all an inner game. It's about working with your subconscious, your unconscious mind to make this change. So you can make the shift from the positive expectations about continuing the habit and the rewards you'll get, and instead feel 100 times, 1,000 times better by making the change and becoming a non-smoker.